I've always hated my boss, but after the accident, everything changed. A demonic Empress took over her body. And now, I'm the only one who can help her.
On a rainy night, during an accident, a voice was heard. A young man wondered whether he should save his boss, although, in truth, he didn't want to get involved in that situation. While trying to save her, he recalled everything she had done to him at work, and how much she had overburdened him in recent times. He settled her carefully on the ground, thinking he was acting out of mere compassion, and questioned whether he would accumulate any good virtue by doing so. He approached and performed mouth-to-mouth resuscitation on his boss. At that moment, a beam of light shot down from the sky and struck the girl lying on the ground. Nervously, only one thought ran through his mind. Who else would sign his expense reimbursement forms? On the other hand, he couldn't help but notice that his boss's lips were soft and sweet. At that instant, she woke up and asked if he was looking to lose his life. A system unlock message appeared, informing him that he had successfully unlocked the career shock system, because he had successfully shocked the Empress. After receiving a kick to the face, the young man wondered where that voice had come from, and who the Empress was. His boss grabbed him with her legs, flipped him over forcefully, and pinned him down, declaring that those who disrespected her would face divine punishment. Confused, he asked what that was supposed to mean, and suggested to Miss Lin that if she had suffered any head injury, they should go to the hospital. At that moment, she realized she could no longer use her true energy. The young man commented that she seemed fine, and suggested she go to the hospital by herself, adding that if she didn't, an ambulance would arrive shortly. While the boss stared at her hand in confusion, he mentioned that he still had to work overtime and needed to leave, asking her not to forget to help him with the reimbursement later. His boss, stunned, couldn't understand where she was or what had happened to her true energy. Sometime later, the young man appears relieved for having finished his work and for being able to enjoy his valuable and rare day off. Arriving home, he asks his brother if there is anything to eat. The boy replies that he left nothing, thinking his brother would stay at the office for another night. Smiling, the young man asks if the boss had squeezed the poor man dry once again. The boy then gets startled and drops his can of soda on the floor. The man, confused, asks what is happening. But suddenly the boss arrives at the scene, questioning whether this kind of cage could really be called a home. The employee asks his boss what she is doing there, and his brother jokes that he had brought a girl home without warning. Looking at the man, the woman asks him to explain everything to her, as she is very confused and wants to avoid a punishment for the offense he committed earlier. She then takes him by the hand and asks him to follow her for a moment. The younger brother thinks they are participating in some kind of realistic RPG and believes his brother, Youwei, really knows how to have fun. Arriving at another place, Youwei tells the boss that even though he is her subordinate, she cannot force him to work during his day off. The girl asks if he is supposed to be some kind of disciple of hers and explains that she is an empress of the underworld sect. After 3,000 years of cultivation, she has finally managed to reach both the human and heavenly realms. She then asks what place this is and why she cannot channel her energy. Observing the girl, Lu wonders if she has read too many novels and gone crazy. But he explains that there are some rumors about cultivators and martial artists existing in this world, although encountering them is extremely rare. He adds that both he and she would be considered normal people. At that moment, the woman grabs him by the neck and gets closer. Lu begins pleading to resolve things peacefully, without any physical contact. The girl, very close to our protagonist's face, says that he does not emit the aura of someone from the Righteous Alliance, and seems not to have been sent to capture her. Quickly, Youwei pulls away, asking what that was. At that moment, some men prepare an ambush against the two of them. The boss turns and shouts that she will punish the eavesdroppers. The men then come out of hiding, and one of them says he did not expect to be caught so easily. Upon seeing the man's hand filled with pulsating energy, Lu is impressed, thinking that he might be a real cultivator. He asks why he is being attacked. The man responds that our protagonist has seen too much and must be eliminated, and then charges toward Lu. Suddenly, a shield appears around Youwei, and a system message warns that the shield was activated because the host's life was in danger. the men are thrown far away, and one of the attackers asks if that was even possible. Lu, looking at his own hands, wonders about the voice that had reappeared and where that shield came from. The supposed Miss Lin observes the men and says she will teach her disciple something. Leaving enemies alive is the same as digging one's own grave. She lifts one of her feet and stomps hard on the ground, concluding by saying that to eliminate such ants, brute force alone would be enough. Watching the woman from a distance, Youwei starts to realize that all of this is real. He has truly awakened a shock system, and the person standing before him no longer seemed to be Miss Lin, but the true Empress. Some time later, while returning home, Lu read the messages his younger brother had sent, informing him that he would leave the house free and spend the night at a cyber cafe. The boy also asked how a not-so-beautiful girl could be interested in Youwei. Nervous, the protagonist asked himself the same question. He opened the door, invited her in, told her to make herself comfortable and sit wherever she wanted, but warned her not to mind the mess, as he hadn't had time to clean up. She sat down on a sofa and said she didn't mind. Trying to understand the current situation, Lu then asked if she had really crossed worlds and taken possession of his boss's body, Miss Lin Miyauki. The Empress replied that it was more or less like that and explained that during a tribulation, after her successful ascension, at the moment she was about to fight against the Righteous Alliance, she ended up falling into that body and losing her powers. Lu asked if those people from the Righteous Alliance were her enemies. The Empress answered that they were just a bunch of hypocritical idiots who thought themselves righteous, but if they wanted to fight, she would show them what a true massacre was. Feeling uncomfortable, Lu thought that in this world, she would be considered a tyrannical leader. He offered her a drink and warned that this world had different rules and laws. He picked up the TV remote and suggested she see for herself. He began explaining that, in this world, there were things like magic, witchcraft, and advanced weaponry, and that reaching the skies or destroying meteors could be done with just a flick of a finger. Confused, she asked if such a strange path really existed. Lu confirmed it, and added that no matter how powerful someone's cultivation was, they could not resist such forces. Therefore, he asked her to avoid harming others, or there would be serious consequences. She stood up and commented that the energy in this world was so weak that she doubted there were any great masters around. Then she placed 2 fingers on his forehead and said that Lu's aptitude was among the best she had ever seen. Embarrassed, Lu wondered if his aptitude had been enhanced by the system. The Empress commented that if he had been in her world, he would reach the spirit refiner level within 300 years, and that was a pity. At that moment, Lu's cell phone started ringing. Sighing, he said it was just a worker wanting to get paid. When he checked the device, he saw it was his supervisor, who had sent him several messages demanding that he fix the bug immediately, threatening that if it wasn't done that night, he needn't bother coming to work anymore. Annoyed with the pressure, Lu remarked that the supervisor should be turned into an AI that didn't need rest. The Empress approached the window and said that working late into the night was no different from hard labor. Looking at the sky, she remembered that once she had seen the man responsible for bridge repairs mistreat the workers' wives and children, and because of that, she had cut him into pieces. Lu looked at her, confused, thinking how casually she talked about ending lives as if it were nothing. She continued explaining that this incident had been used by the Righteous Alliance as an excuse to attack her, but, confident, she said she didn't care, because those idiots would never be able to defeat her. The protagonist then thought that maybe she wasn't so bad after all. He asked her if her cell phone was still working, as such an item was very essential here. Curious, the Empress asked if the item was truly that magical, and began looking for it. She handed it to Lu, asking if that was what he meant. Lu thought it likely that, given the accident, the phone would be broken, but to his surprise, he realized that even with the car destroyed, the device had suffered no apparent damage. He took her hand and said he would show her how to use it. He brought her finger close to the screen and explained that this was how she could unlock the phone. Embarrassed by the situation, she called him a perverted disciple and said he deserved to receive divine punishment. Sometime later, Lu had ordered some food. The Empress asked what it was, since it had a strong smell of spices. Showing the snack, Lu said that barbecue was the best option for the evening. He grabbed a skewer and offered another one to her, telling her to try it. As she put it in her mouth, she felt something new. She said it wasn't bad, but the sensation was as if a dragon were breathing fire into her mouth. She asked if they often ate that kind of food. Lu replied yes, and asked if there wasn't chili in her world. The Empress said there was, but it wasn't nearly as strong. Lu commented that there were indeed differences between their worlds, but that people there were used to eating like that. He then offered her a can of Coca-Cola, saying it was the best thing to go with the food, and that although it looked like poison, it tasted really good. She took a sip and spat out a bit, saying it gave her a tingling feeling on her tongue and a fizzy sensation in her stomach. Lu explained that it was very popular there, helped quench thirst, but that if you drank too much... Suddenly she burped. Laughing, he added that people who drank too much usually burped easily. Looking at the can, she said it actually tasted good, but really did seem like poison. Then she thought that, if she were drinking that in her palace, her disciples would freak out. She would tell them she was using that poison to temper her body, but that they shouldn't imitate her. Everyone would celebrate. Lost in those thoughts, she smiled. He asked if it was really good for her. Coming back to herself, she said she was just thinking about something. Lu offered to buy something else in case the chili was too strong. She held his arm and said she just wasn't used to it. Lu asked if she was sure because it could be really spicy. With a super spicy skewer in hand, she said she was the Empress and shouldn't be afraid of a mere chili. She tried to eat it again but couldn't handle it. He then offered her a bowl of noodles, and the Empress commented that it wasn't as spicy. Sometime later, she showed up clinging to a can of Coca-Cola, saying it had become her favorite thing. Watching from afar, he remarked that he had told her not to be so stubborn. At that moment, his phone started ringing. When he checked the messages, it was once again his supervisor, asking if he had fixed the bug, and saying that if the protagonist didn't resolve it that night, he'd report it to that damned boss in the morning. Looking at the message, the protagonist thought that man still wanted to be the boss's lapdog, even without knowing what had actually happened. Looking at the boss's body, he thought it didn't matter, as long as the person was there. The next day, at the company building, the Empress was fascinated by the elevator. Lu asked if she remembered that everyone called her Chief Lin. She said she did. When they arrived at the 18th floor, the elevator doors opened and a man walked up to her, saying she had been very cruel, since people had been worried about her, and she hadn't said a word all night. He leaned over her and said that at least she was safe, and asked her to hurry so she could enjoy the breakfast he had made for her. The Empress asked Lu Youwei who that man was, and he explained that it was Gu Xiaonan, one of her suitors. More precisely, the son of the building's owner. Pointing at Lu, Gu Xiaonan said he shouldn't be sharing the elevator with her. Waving his hand in front of his face, he complained that he couldn't stand the smell of poverty anymore. Completely ignoring the man, the Empress and Lu went to her office to check a document. At that moment, another man came running toward her. He pointed at the protagonist and asked her to fire him, because he hadn't finished what he needed to do the night before, since Lin hadn't fixed the bug, and he was always slandering the boss. Whispering in her ear, Lu told her that this was the man who had called during the night. Annoyed, the Empress said that so he was the one slandering her. Nervously, the man said he would never do such a thing, and that it was probably Lu Youwei twisting the truth. The Empress shouted that she and Lu had been together all night and asked if the man still had the nerve to lie. Everyone around was shocked by the information, creating tension in the room and leaving the protagonist desperate. But at that moment, a system message appeared, saying that he had awakened the shock system, and as a reward had received a set of ancient martial arts techniques. Entering the company's presidential office, Lu was sitting at the desk and said that fortunately, the computer password wasn't a problem for him. As soon as he accessed the documents, they would know where the boss lived. The Empress commented that, from what she had heard, this boss hadn't been very kind to him, which was why he was going through so much trouble to help her. The protagonist said he just wanted to help her, but deep down, he wanted to use the powers she had as the boss. He asked her to hurry and sign his reimbursement because he wanted to see that man get what he deserved. He added that he couldn't leave her alone, since some reporters might find her, and that would be like abandoning her to her death. Frightened, she thought the reporters were going to arrest her. Tasting the food on the boss's desk, Lu commented that it was delicious and asked if she didn't want to try some. Remembering the spicy food from the previous day, she refused to try it this time. Lu said this dish wasn't spicy. Sometime later, as they were leaving the presidential office, they found the liar carrying some buckets. Crying, he asked if that would be enough, since his back hurt a lot. The Empress turned to him and said she was being very kind for not punishing him with divine retribution, and that if he complained again, she would add 10 more hours. Gu asked her what kind of chaotic work Youwei had to be involved in. Whispering, he said the protagonist was clumsy and poor, and asked that his behavior not influence her. The Empress became irritated upon hearing that and turned to face him. The man said she had given him that look before, but now she seemed like a different person. Lu turned to him and thanked him for the delicious ham. Surprised, the man asked if the protagonist had even eaten what he had made for her breakfast. Lu walked away with the Empress and told the man they had some important matters to deal with. Once again freaking out, Gu asked what those private matters were. At that moment, Lu realized that, with that level of shock, the system wouldn't be activated. So he concluded he would have to try something different. Annoyed, Gu said Youwei had better be ready for the consequences. Arriving in front of a luxurious mansion, the protagonist is surprised to see that she already knows how to open the digital lock without him needing to explain it. She replies that it's only natural. They enter the house, and Lu says he will teach her how to use some of the items inside. He takes her to the kitchen and says he'll explain something later. She responds that it's not necessary, as she has never cooked before. Next, he shows her the bathroom and explains that she can bathe and also take care of her needs there. Alarmed, she asks if doing both things in the same place isn't bad, but he replies that it's fine, it's a toilet, and she just has to press a button for everything to go away. He shows her the shower and says it can be adjusted for hot water. Excited, she becomes eager to take a bath. She asks him to get her some clothes. Lu goes to the wardrobe and is shocked by what he finds there. He never imagined his boss would be like that, but fortunately, there were plenty of clothes, so he didn't have to worry about it. The Empress asks if everything is ready. She says he's too slow and that she's about to catch a cold. At that moment, the protagonist panics, as he has no idea how to teach her how to put on those clothes. Outside the bathroom, he says it's just a matter of following the picture and not wearing the same clothes as before. She replies that she understands and asks him to stop bothering her. After all, it was just underwear, and it shouldn't be that hard. But, on second thought, she finds the design very complicated, and then wonders if a string can even be considered clothing. Meanwhile, in the living room, the protagonist is watching TV. She walks in, and he invites her to watch a documentary about world history. She becomes interested, and he explains that the documentary talks about the evolution of life, industry, and energy. She sits next to him and, excited, says she'd love to watch it. However, 5 minutes later, she falls asleep. Looking at her, the protagonist comments that she said she was interested but fell asleep right away. He tries to cover her with a blanket, but she cuts it in two. Startled, he says he was just trying to cover her. He wonders if she's still asleep and tries once more to use a piece of the fabric to cover her. Again, she tears the cloth in half. Seeing this, the protagonist wonders if she's always alert, even while sleeping. So, he gives up and decides it's better to stay away from her. He opens the system and says he'll practice the ancient martial arts he just acquired. Sitting on the floor, he tries to channel his energy and cultivate the celestial Dao fist technique. After a while, he thinks the name sounds too pretentious, but as he practices a few moves, he feels pain throughout his entire body. His chest tightens so much that it feels like his heart is going to explode. The Empress approaches and says that if he continues practicing, he might end up dead. She explains that the better the technique, the riskier it can be. The protagonist may have talent, but his foundation is weak. Therefore, he won't be able to withstand the pressure that this technique puts on the body. In other words, she says he is still too weak. Embarrassed, Lu thanks her for telling him that. He asks if she really slept earlier, and she replies that yes, and now she's full of energy. At that moment, his phone rings. When he answers, he asks Manager Zheng what the problem is. The Empress watches him, and Lu turns around, saying he's going back to work and will be home later. She asks if being by her side wouldn't spare him from such tedious tasks. He replies that with great power comes great responsibility, and that he needs to teach this to others. Otherwise, everything will become a mess later. He starts to leave the house, saying he doesn't want to make other people's lives worse. The Empress calls him back. He turns around and asks what she wants, and she tells him to come closer. Embarrassed, Lu stammers that maybe it's not appropriate. Suddenly, she hits him on the head. He asks if he offended her somehow, and she tells him to forget it and just go. Confused, he asks if she's sending him away, and she tells him to stop being silly and stay. As he leaves the house, he says he'll order food for her, and that she should just stay there and not scare people. At that moment, she remembers that she no longer has her energy, and can't send her consciousness remotely anymore. As night falls, the protagonist stretches and feels relieved for having finished his work. His co-worker, calling him President Lu, asks if he would treat them to a late-night snack. The protagonist questions the reason, and the man tells Lu to stop pretending. After all, he was with the president. Lu replies that the man is reading too much into things. He explains that she had an accident yesterday, but wasn't seriously injured, and since he was nearby, he simply helped her. The co-workers are shocked by the revelation and ask if it's true. The protagonist confirms, saying that if it weren't, why would he be there working overtime so late? As they talk, the young Gu watches them. A bit more confident now, he realizes it was all just a coincidence, but becomes irritated seeing the protagonist showing off in front of the woman he loves. He decides he'll make him pay for it. Meanwhile, in the president's luxurious mansion, the Empress is sitting in the dark at the table. She hears the protagonist arrive. He asks what's going on since the lights are off. She turns around and says she's very angry, and that the consequences will be serious. He places the food on the table and suggests she eat something first. She pauses for a moment, then starts devouring the food, saying he should have brought it earlier. Sometime later, satisfied, she asks why the food isn't spicy this time. Smiling, he replies that, in this case, the wontons are better when they're lighter. She grabs her phone and asks if he has something against her. She complains that she can't order food with just 2 taps and questions why she can't do it herself. The protagonist realizes this is what she was actually upset about. He sits beside her and says he'll take a look. He explains that she needs to scan her face to complete the payment and asks her to point the camera at her face, since that's the only way she can pay for the food. While cleaning the table, he wonders what those papers about meditation techniques are, and how his boss, Lin, could even read that kind of thing. The Empress replies that in fact, she was the one who wrote them. The protagonist is even more surprised, but she says it's not so strange since she still knows how to use paper and pen. She gets up and explains that it's a meditative breathing technique that will help him strengthen his body and focus his mind. She continues, saying that once his meridians are unblocked and his body reshaped, he'll be able to handle the technique he's been practicing. Embarrassed, he thinks that it's the first time a girl has done something like this for him. The Empress then says there's a condition. The protagonist jokingly replies that he's not going to sell his body for it. But she explains that if he accepted her methods, then he'll have to practice according to them. She doesn't care about his natural talent. She wants him to master the first chapter within 3 weeks, because she never keeps lazy people around. At that moment, the protagonist feels as if he has just seen a demon. He asks how long her disciples usually take to practice. She replies that it takes around 4 weeks, but since Lu is naturally more talented, 1 week less shouldn't be a problem. He then picks up the paper and begins to read. He needs to keep the energy flow light and circulating through his body. Meanwhile, she's sitting on the table, eating some cookies. She tells him to eat first, that there's no rush. But the protagonist says he feels his body has become much lighter. She is startled, realizing he might have mastered the entire chapter in just a few breaths. Youwei looks at his own hand and asks what he has just mastered. The Empress replies that he has mastered the fundamentals of body refinement. She asks him to take a deep breath and try again. The protagonist pauses for a moment and breathes. The Empress is astonished, realizing that what she's sensing is spiritual energy from a radius of dozens of kilometers being drawn toward him. Surprised, she wonders what kind of monstrous talent this could be. A system shock message appears, stating that he has once again surprised the Empress, and as a result, he has received a reward. Instant steps. Lu thinks that once again the system has appeared, and given him a reward for the shock he caused. He concludes that, for the system to appear again, he will have to shock someone even more. Seeing Lu laugh, the Empress asks why he is laughing like that. He replies that it's nothing. He's just thinking about the day he will become an incomparable master. Then, he turns to her and asks if she has any more instructions. Otherwise, he will go back to practicing. She says yes. There's something very important. She asks why there's no Coca-Cola in the house and why she can never find any food. This leaves the protagonist speechless. Sometime later, he's rummaging through her fridge and comments that if he has to teach her how to order things from the market this late at night, the delivery guy might have problems. He then hands her a can of soda, which she drinks immediately. She throws herself on the sofa and says she's feeling much better now. Then she tells Lu that she needs to remind him of something important. She asks him to be more practical, as she has seen many prodigies fall because they let power go to their heads. She warns him to always remember that there are always mountains above mountains. The protagonist simply agrees and says he understands. At that moment, the Empress slightly gets up and lets out a burp out of nowhere. Embarrassed, she says that this body is still very fragile, while hiccuping non-stop. The protagonist tells her he had warned her not to drink so fast, and declares that from now on she can only drink 2 cans per day. And he'll check on that. He also recommends that she brush her teeth before going to bed. She complains, saying he's really annoying, and asks if he wasn't leaving already. The protagonist says he's leaving, even if she gets mad at him, unless she wants to end up with diabetes and enough cavities to never drink soda again. Shocked, she asks if she won't be able to drink anymore, and he says he's just joking, then says he's leaving. After he's gone, she feels like she finally has a bit of peace. However, he shouts from the door, letting her know he saved his number in her phone. If she wants to call him, she just needs to tap the screen. At that moment, she thinks about how people once feared her wrath and did everything she asked. It had been a long time since someone cared about her that much. Arriving home, Lu wonders where his brother is, but he says he doesn't care and throws himself onto the couch, as he had a long day and needs to relax. He then picks up his phone and opens a game. He tries to see if his friends are online and sends a message in the chat, asking if they're playing anything. However, his friends start coming up with some lame excuses to leave the conversation at that moment. Lu gets upset with their attitude, but one of them asks if he's still in the city of Zhejiang. The protagonist gets excited and replies that it had been a long time since he'd seen that friend online, and the two end up planning to grab something to eat together the next day. Lu thinks, at that moment, that it's been 4 years, and he has never seen this friend in person. With that avatar, he could easily be mistaken for a gang leader. Meanwhile, elsewhere, in a surveillance room, a few men are searching for something. One of them says that one of his brothers disappeared there, and that there were no traces of his whereabouts. The other responds by telling him not to worry, as he found someone to deal with this guy. He says this while looking at a photo of our protagonist. The next morning, in front of a diner, the protagonist was sending a message to his friend, letting him know he had already arrived at the location. Lu wondered if the orders he had placed at the diner were ready, since his friend seemed a bit weak, and the food might help him regain some strength. As he thought about how his friend would appreciate the warm welcome, someone began approaching him. A young woman arrived and sat in the chair across from Lu, who told her that the seat was already reserved. However, upon seeing the girl, he commented that he had seen maids selling drinks in some places before, but didn't expect that kind of service there. Smiling, the girl replied that she was the old maniac, his friend from the chat. She showed him her phone and asked if she hadn't made a mistake too, right? The protagonist asked if she was really his friend after all. In the game chat, her voice had sounded very different. The girl explained that one of her sisters had told her she should disguise herself as a man for safety, as she was very easy to manipulate when alone. That's why she used a voice modifier. She even mentioned that once she forgot to turn it on, but apparently no one noticed. Lu said that everyone had thought it was a woman the old maniac had brought home. Pouting, she asked him not to call her by that nickname, saying she didn't like it. It had been her sister who gave it to her. Then, she simply asked him to call her Xiao Tu, and informed him that she was moving to the city of Zhejiang. Some time passed, and they were walking around the city. Lu asked if she had come alone, and if she wasn't afraid that he might be a bad person. She replied that she had been training since childhood, and that even if 3 or 5 people came at her, no one would be able to get close. Lu commented that it felt kind of strange when a dear brother turns into a girl. Surprised, she asked if he was calling her cute. After banging the railing several times, Xiaotu said she felt a little embarrassed that he had said that out of nowhere. At that moment, the protagonist asked if she had heard something, because from all the banging, she had cracked the railing. Suddenly, the railing broke, and the protagonist almost fell into the lake. Xiaotu panicked and rushed to save him, pushing him backward, only to fall hard on top of him, leaving the protagonist completely sore. Some time had passed, and they were somewhere around there. Xiaotu apologized to Lu and said she always ended up breaking things here and there. He replied that it was okay, since he could handle it, and then told her not to worry. But deep down, he thought it was a good thing he had practiced the meditation technique. If it weren't for that, he wouldn't have a single bone left intact. Xiao's phone started ringing, notifying her that she had received a new request. Excited, she said her first order had arrived, leaving the protagonist confused. She then showed him the phone and asked if he didn't know the Xiaoshang app. The protagonist thought for a moment and replied that the app was quite popular at the moment and was used for people to post tasks to be completed by warriors and cultivators. He then remembered the day he ordered exotic lamb skewers. He continued, saying that after completing a task, the one who accepted it not only received the reward, but could also accumulate heroic points. Xiaotu agreed, and said that becoming the greatest heroine in the world was her biggest dream. Upon reading the task, it said that someone had stolen the employer's wife, and he wanted someone to deal with the guy. For a moment, the protagonist became furious at whoever had taken the employer's beloved. But upon looking closely, he realized the photo of the culprit looked a lot like himself. Without thinking twice, Xiaotu launched a strike toward the protagonist but ended up hitting a tree. Lu jumped back and asked her to calm down a little. After all, how could he do something like that? Besides, heroes like her should look for evidence first. Xiaotu told him to stop resisting, as this would be her first mission to become a great heroine. If he really was her friend, he should let her capture him. Then she lunged toward the protagonist, who responded by saying that others risk their lives for a friend, while she was trying to capture him just for the sake of a mission. She replied by asking him to become her heroic points, assuring him not to worry because she would take full responsibility. Once again, Lu dodged Xiaotu's attacks, making it clear that those evasions were not just coincidences. The protagonist, looking at her, remarked that dealing with a woman is very difficult, especially when she's trying to hit you. Then he decided he would no longer hold back. He jumped and quickly got behind her, using the Celestial Dao technique, bringing his hand dangerously close to the girl. Surprised, Xiaotu wondered if he had been playing dumb. At that moment, a message from the shock system appeared, stating that he had achieved a primary shock and had gained the soul shock technique. Shaken, Xiaotu opened up, saying that her grandfather had warned her that there might be some masters scattered throughout China, and that no matter how much she trained, she would never be able to match Lu Youwei. Trying to comfort her, the protagonist explained that he had also trained since childhood, but had only succeeded thanks to a sudden counterattack. Still suspicious, Xiaotu claimed that Lu's attacks didn't seem like those of someone who had been training since childhood. Then she said she would check. After all, someone who trained from a young age should have some visible marks. She told him to stand still so she could see. Desperate, the protagonist said he would tell her the truth. After some time explaining, Xiaotu is shocked to hear that the prodigious protagonist has only been practicing for 3 months, and says he is very talented. He comments that his skills and opportunities were somewhat special. Xiaotu replies that she understands, as cultivation would be a family secret, and she states that she won't interfere. However, she continues, saying that the fact he managed to achieve all of this in just 3 months is surprising. She thinks her grandfather would be impressed, and then says that one day she will introduce him to him. The protagonist then asks if she would help him find out who placed a bounty on his head. He then makes a vow that he would never do anything disloyal. She looks at a message on her phone and says she can't see exactly who it was, but she might be able to arrange a meeting. Sometime later, somewhere in the city, a few people step out of a van. One of them approaches and asks if she was the one who agreed to help with the task. Xiaotu points to the protagonist and says, they can do whatever they want with him. The protagonist, upon seeing that person, says he has never seen them before in his life. The person then thanks her and says he will definitely give her a 5-star review. The protagonist tells the man that they don't even know each other, so this must be a mistake. Staring at the protagonist, the man asks if he has already forgotten that he took his man and confided in him. Other people gather around the conversation, and then the man declares that today he will get his revenge on the protagonist. The two women who arrived with the group say they would love to do something to Lu because he is very handsome. At that moment, the protagonist tries to understand why these people are attacking him, whether it's just for mischief or if they are being manipulated by someone. Then he decides to test his new technique on them. He uses the soul shock technique, and then tells them to go back and do to the one who sent them what they intended to do to him. Xiao Tu asks if Lu is just going to let them go like that. The protagonist replies that it's no problem, and that he'll let them fly for a while. After walking a bit more through the city, Xiao Tu sighs and says she thought they would spend more time together. However, she mentions that she's getting a call and, if she doesn't return, her sister will come looking for her. The protagonist says it's fine. Since she's staying in the city, they can go out more often and meet up with the others. She agrees and says she's heading out. Then, she answers the phone and tells her sister that she's already on her way and that there's no need for her to come pick her up. Watching her talk on the phone, the protagonist wonders how their other friends would react if they found out that she is actually a woman. At that moment, the Empress calls. He picks up, asking if it's really her. She replies by asking if it's really that difficult for her to learn how to use a communication device. Laughing, the protagonist says no, and she then asks him to accompany her to buy some clothes. Sometime later, the Empress arrives at the location. The protagonist offers compensation and a pack of cigarettes to the driver for the trouble his boss may have caused, explaining that she didn't intend to rob him. He then turns to the Empress and says that if she doesn't know how to hail a cab, she shouldn't climb onto the car's hood. Embarrassed, she explains that Lu told her to stop a car, so that's what she did. The protagonist asks why she suddenly wants to buy clothes, since there are still plenty in the wardrobe. She replies by asking if he expects her to wear someone else's clothes for the rest of her life. The clerk asks Lu if he came to buy clothes for his girlfriend. Lu thinks the clerk is quite sharp for starting by asking the man, and replies that she should ask the person who's actually paying, as he's just there to carry the bags. Some men nearby laugh, saying that with that humble appearance, he'd never be able to get a girlfriend like her. The clerk then asks the Empress if she'd prefer something more comfortable and offers her a dress. She also comments that, based on the lady's appearance, a Chanel look would also match her image well. The Empress asks the protagonist what this style she mentioned is. He explains that the clerk just wants to know whether the clothes are meant for a special occasion or everyday wear. The Empress smiles and says she understands. She then asks if there is such a thing as fast clothing, which leaves everyone confused, not understanding what she means. Also confused, the Empress says she saw it on a website. The protagonist thinks to himself that he should have made her an account, since she was now browsing through his search history. He makes up an excuse, saying that she's been into heroines lately and just wants an outfit that makes her look powerful. Gracefully, the Empress says that if they don't have one, it's fine. But if there's something like that, she'd be willing to try. This leaves the men unsure if the protagonist was truly just a bag carrier, or if they were witnessing some kind of couple's performance. The protagonist then says she will be attending a dinner and asks if they have anything more appropriate. Awkwardly, the clerk turns and says, "Of course." Sometime later, the Empress steps out of the fitting room, leaving everyone completely stunned by her beauty. She looked absolutely radiant in that dress. As she comes out, she comments that the dress is very similar to one she used to wear and asks what they thought. The attendant said she had been a little worried that the outfit might be too flashy, but it ended up matching perfectly. The Empress looked at herself in the mirror and then said she would buy it. She pointed at the protagonist and asked the attendant if there was something in his size as well, as she wanted to buy a set for him too. The protagonist felt embarrassed by the situation and heard the attendant say yes, that she would go find something for him. A few minutes later, the protagonist came out of the fitting room dressed in a suit. The Empress commented that the outfit suited him very well and called him over so they could go pay the bill. The protagonist asked why she wanted him to get new clothes, and she replied that Lin Miaoqi's family had sent a message inviting them to a family banquet in a few days. She then paid the bill and said she thought it would be a great opportunity to get to know that world a little better, which was why she decided to invite the protagonist to accompany her. However, the attendant said there seemed to be a problem with the payment. The protagonist wondered how that could have happened, since Lin Miaoqi's account should have had more than enough to cover the costs. He then said he would pay, thinking that even if he had to go through a couple of tight months, that day had been worth it. The attendant informed him that the total came to 38,888, which made the protagonist wince upon hearing it. She asked if he would like to collect any loyalty points, but he said it wasn't necessary. Sometime later, the Empress was having a drink at a diner, but she commented that it wasn't as good as Coca-Cola. While checking Lin's transaction history, the protagonist noticed there had been a huge transfer recently and decided he would speak with manager Zheng. The Empress remarked that financial matters were tedious and that she didn't understand anything about them. Lu asked if she wasn't worried about running out of money, and she simply replied that from now on, the protagonist would be in charge of that, and that her money now belonged to him as well. Surprised, the protagonist asked if she was saying the money was his, and she confirmed it. He began imagining money raining down on him, but the Empress warned him that he now belonged to her and wouldn't be able to escape that. Embarrassed, Lu said that this matter needed to be looked into more clearly. At that moment, the Empress noticed something and thought those people were really sharp. The protagonist mentioned he had felt like they were being watched earlier, but had assumed it was just his imagination. The Empress said Lu had good instincts, but that she was very tired now and asked him to take care of the matter. Meanwhile, a group of men was nearby. One of them was on the phone discussing the cancellation of the plan. The man on the other end said that the boy should have been eliminated for witnessing Lin Miaoqi's accident, but since she wasn't dead, there was no need to create additional trouble. The man on site replied that it didn't matter. 3 of their brothers had been lost in the incident, and now the other man could do whatever he wanted because it was no longer his concern. He hung up and said that Bastard didn't care anymore. Then he asked the group what they should do. The guy who was with them responded that the debt would have to be paid sooner or later. Sometime later, back in the boss's office, the manager shows up delivering some documents. He said he had already spoken with Miss Lin about purchasing a batch of goods, and that she had agreed to pay for it, with the promise that once they got a return, the amount would be refunded to her account. He then informed that a new contract needed to be signed. Looking at the document, the protagonist realized he wasn't very good with numbers. He then remembered what the Empress had said about the money being his as well. Lu then asked the manager for the new contract, and the manager handed him a stack of documents, saying that everything was there, and that Lu would be signing next month's contracts. The protagonist asked if the manager expected him to sign contracts for the whole year. Sarcastically, the manager replied, "Kind of," and added that if Lu couldn't handle it, he could ask for help. Looking at the papers, Lu thought he didn't know what this man was plotting, but decided to trust only himself. He opened a spreadsheet on the computer and asked if it was about that purchase. The manager confirmed, turned to leave the room, and told him to call if he needed anything. Later, in another part of the company, Gu Xiaonan asked the manager if Lu Youwei hadn't trusted him to sign the contracts. The manager replied that Lu really didn't trust him. The two began laughing, and the manager said it was perfect, while Gu called the protagonist a crazy hypocrite. The manager said that if Lu had passed that responsibility on to him, any mistake would have made him the one to blame. But now, there was no one to look after Lu in case something went wrong. He commented that Lu Youwei had planned everything, but hadn't foreseen that the supply list would be incorrect. That way, it would be impossible to achieve good results, and it would take an eternity to check everything. Gu said the man had done a good job, but the manager said it wasn't over yet. With the company's budget tight, if Lu ruined a major contract like that, the entire company would be affected. Even if Miss Lin tried to defend him, Gu, as a shareholder, could protest to have Lu removed. Gu said Zheng was really good at this. At that moment, a young woman appeared and informed Gu Xiaonan that some people had come to see him and had just arrived to report something. She asked if she should call the police, but Gu replied there was no need, as he knew those people. The woman agreed and said that was fine. Gu Xiaonan also instructed her not to tell anyone or bother him, no matter what happened. She agreed and advised him to get some rest. The young woman then saw Gu calling those people to the staircase, saying it would be more spacious for their conversation. She wondered what kind of talk they would have on the stairs. Soon she heard Gu asking why no one was saying anything or reporting what had happened. Then she heard Gu asking them to stop, and she started thinking that Master Gu might be in danger. As she approached the door, she remembered he had asked not to be disturbed, and then wondered if everything had been planned. Suddenly, she began hearing some strange sounds and, embarrassed, thought that maybe the kinds of things rich people like to play with were just beyond her understanding. Sometime later, Lu shows up, looking tired. He thinks that everything doesn't seem wrong, but wonders what the problem could be. So, he decides that if this doesn't work, he will check again. At that moment, his phone starts ringing. When he answers, the Empress yells at him, saying that even if he doesn't need to eat, she does. Lu tells her to order some food because he's going to need to stay a bit longer. She then asks why he's staying and says she'll give him only 1 minute to show up. The protagonist then says he understands. A few minutes later, at a diner, the Empress is tasting a new dish. She says it has a delicious flavor. The protagonist offers her his pork intestine noodles to try, but she refuses, saying it's too strange. The protagonist asks her why she decided to go out since she's now able to order food at home, and then questions whether she's just using this as an excuse to make him order things for her. She chokes, and irritated, says she was just indecisive because of the many options and wanted his help. The protagonist then says he understands. She asks how work has been going, and Lu explains that he hasn't been able to solve a contract issue, and that, even after looking over it several times, he still doesn't understand what's wrong. The Empress says he might just be being a bit careless, but Lu responds that it's not that. Knowing Manager Jung, he knows the man isn't a good person. But the protagonist says they should eat first, and asks again if she doesn't want to try it. Suddenly, a man shouts that the pork intestine was poorly cleaned and asks if that's how they're supposed to sell something to someone. The protagonist, hearing this, is shocked, as he was almost done with his plate. The Empress asks what the man is trying to say, and Lu replies that it's better if she doesn't know. The diner's owner arrives, asking what all the yelling is about. The man then responds, calling him a hypocrite and saying he doesn't know what's going on. The owner tells the man not to slander the diner. The man, in turn, replies that the evidence is right there. The protagonist then stands up, and the Empress asks what's going on. The two men keep arguing until Lu approaches from behind the diner's owner and says that he also ordered a portion of intestines. Then, he grabs the man by the clothes and says he also wants double compensation for this. The shop owner asks Lu to calm down, insisting that his diner doesn't do such things. The protagonist asks if this is serious. The desperate man then says he'll explain. The large intestines they sell are made from curd, meaning they're vegan. So how could they be dirty? But instead of calming things down, the situation only gets worse. Other customers start accusing the owner of selling fake products and also demand their money back. Lu returns to the table and comments that a fake product seller just ran into a scammer. While eating her food, the Empress says that in her land, this would be enough to trigger divine punishment. She then looks satisfied and says the wontons are good, so they should forgive the owner this time. At that moment, the protagonist has a sudden realization about the contract issue and finally understands where the manager was trying to trick him. The next day, at the company office, the manager asked if Lu had finished reviewing that batch of documents. The protagonist replied that he had already signed and sent them to the suppliers, and asked if there was something wrong. The manager then said that this was bad, and began saying that it was all his fault. He explained that he had just realized there was an error in the supplier's form, and that they had been using outdated prices. Then, he shouted for everyone to hear that our protagonist had signed a contract that would make the company lose millions. Looking at Lu, people started questioning what had happened until Gu appeared, pointing at the protagonist and asking what was going on. At that moment, Gu felt a pain in his backside, which made the manager ask if he was okay. Lu replied that he was just curious about what they were doing. Gu then said that the company's cash flow was tight, that the employees' bonuses had not yet been paid, and now this problem had come up. The people panicked upon hearing that their bonuses might not be paid. Gu pointed at the protagonist and said that, as the representative of President Lin, he should explain the situation. Lin explained that the contract had been sent with the correct pricing for the products, and that there was no problem with it. Gu, confused, looked at Jing, and the protagonist said that he had sent everything by email and that Gu could check. After looking at the email, the manager confirmed that the numbers were indeed correct. Lu then took advantage of the situation and said that, because of Manager Jung's oversight, they had almost lost everyone's bonus, asking the manager to explain himself. Jung apologized, saying that he was very overwhelmed and had made a mistake. Looking at Gu, he concluded by saying that, fortunately, Brother Lu had corrected the error in time. Gu commented that even with Manager Jung's mistake, no real damage had occurred. Lu stood up from his chair and said that since young Master Gu wasn't feeling well, he should rest a little more. He grabbed Gu by the shoulders and made him sit in the chair again, which caused the man to feel pain in his backside once more. Then, Lu said that there was something very intriguing about this whole story. Why was the company's cash flow, including everyone's bonus, in young Master Gu's account? Everyone in the office became outraged upon hearing this. Almost in tears, Gu asked, "What money?" and explained that he wouldn't even care about investing in that small company if it weren't for Lin, as he didn't care about such small amounts. Lu then said that he had almost forgotten that the young master was from the Gu family. The man then said he had just remembered something and pointed at Zheng, saying that it was Zheng who had transferred the money to make the company appear low on funds. Zheng had been planning to make the protagonist take the blame for ruining the contract and then return the funds and turn the situation against our protagonist. Gu concluded that it was all Manager Zheng's fault, leaving the accused man speechless. Lu then turned to Gu and said that the young master was very kind for not being able to bear seeing a good person take the blame. Irritated, Gu thought that it was better not to meet him alone. The office staff turned towards Zheng, and behind the angry men, Lu said they already knew what to do, then stood there watching the chaos unfold. A message arrived on the protagonist's phone. It was the Empress saying she was starving. Lu wondered if today wasn't the Lin family banquet. Sometime later, at the Lin family mansion, the protagonist was being searched by the housemaids. One of them commented that the banquet was about to start, and the protagonist replied that it was fine. The Empress and Lu arrived at the venue. Observing the surroundings, Lu commented that the place was quite spectacular. Meanwhile, the Empress asked if the Lin family wasn't supposed to be prominent. Lu asked if it didn't look like it. Annoyed, she then asked why there wasn't a single glass of Coca-Cola there. A man approaches the Empress and says that their grandmother was worried she wouldn't come. The Empress averts her gaze and says nothing. The man asks why she isn't responding to her own brother. Lu then explains that President Lin hasn't been doing well since the day of the accident and is still recovering. The man asks who he is, and Lu introduces himself as President Lin's assistant. The man then says it's fine and offers her a drink. He points to some people and warns that soon she'll meet some CEOs from various companies, and, as the representative of the Lin family, she must make sure to entertain them well. When the man leaves, the Empress asks who that man was. Lu replies that he's her brother, though he doesn't know if they're blood-related or not. He continues, saying that even though he's under 30, Lin Wei is the head of external relations at the Lin Group, and that Miss Lin's company was just one of many branches of the Lin family business. Sighing, the Empress says this place has an atmosphere she doesn't like. She then looks at the glass and says it seems good, and starts downing the drink, while our protagonist enters a state of panic. She begins to cough and asks why the alcohol is so strong. Lu explains that the distillation techniques are different from those in her world, and that the alcohol here is definitely stronger. The Empress then asks if there really isn't any Coca-Cola, and Lu says he'll look for it. Spotting a waitress passing by, he calls out to her and asks if they have any Coca-Cola. The girl apologizes and says they don't, as the VIPs there only consume sophisticated drinks. She then turns to another waitress, asking who that bumpkin is. The other girl replies that she'll check, and says she should lower her voice so as not to offend anyone important around. The protagonist then starts to overhear what the waitress is saying. She says she doesn't mind him hearing, as he's just someone who came along with Lin Miaoki, and that she heard they're going to push her toward the Pan family tonight. The other girl asks if that's true, and she confirms it, saying that rich families don't keep useless people around. Hearing this, Lu draws some conclusions about his former boss's life. He then looks around, and doesn't find the Empress. She was now near a table with several men, and one of them says that the higher a woman climbs, the less she's worth. Another man comments that's a bit hostile to say, addressing him as young Master Pan, and suggests it's better to just have a drink. The young man asks if he's wrong. Meanwhile, the Empress ignores them, staying silent. One of them asks young Master Pan if he's already chosen someone. He replies that he'll pass on that, as he's a very filial guy, especially after his father's 12th wife ran off with money just yesterday. But no one needs to worry about that, as his father is a generous old man and is eager to have a few more children. He stands up, turns to the Empress, and continues saying that he's always told his father that children from inferior women are worthless, even if they're pretty. But someone like her, with a bit of Lin family blood, would be a great match. He then tries to hug the Empress and asks what she thinks of that. Lu, arriving nearby, says that everyone there is an important figure in the city and that if he offends someone it would be very bad for him. The Empress turns around, irritated, but Lu, with a terrifying look, says, "That's a pity." Then, he grabs the man's hand and twists it. Young Master Pan asks what Lu is doing and tells him to let go. The Empress asks what this guy is trying to do. Still holding the man's hand, Lu says that the higher the energy, the stronger the shock value, and that he can't wait for it. The man pulled his hand back and asked if Lu was crazy. Smiling, Lu said he was just Miss Lin's assistant, and that he was doing her a favor. The man pointed at the protagonist and said there had better be a good explanation for this, or else he would be in big trouble. Lu explained that it seemed like the young master's hand had some sort of problem, so he decided to help him. The man asked if that was how Lu wanted to play, and then called his super strong bodyguard to deal with the protagonist. He also told them to take a look at this assistant, as he might have something that needed fixing. Lu shouted, telling them to stop with that nonsense, and said that if they wanted a fight, they should just come at him. The bodyguard charged at Lu, and when he tried to land a hit on the protagonist, the latter dodged and counterattacked, saying that the man's boxing skills weren't very refined. When he landed the punch, he added that it was more than enough to deal with him. The strike made the bodyguard lose a tooth and sent him flying. Young Pan was shocked, because that man was one of his father's bodyguards, a level 3 cultivator. The guys at the table were also stunned by the scene, as the protagonist had taken down a cultivator with just one blow. This triggered a system shock message to appear. A man appeared behind Youwei and asked what was going on. He replied that it seemed like the people from Miaoki were causing trouble. Annoyed, their uncle said that she was becoming more and more reckless. Young Pan called out to the members of the Lin family and asked if that was how they treated their guests. The uncle stepped forward, asking young Pan to calm down and saying they would handle the situation properly. The young man asked if they still wanted a marriage alliance with the Pan family after something like this. The Empress told Lin that he could benefit from what had just happened. The protagonist watched her and thought that this was expected of her, as she was very sharp. Then Lu replied that, in fact, he just couldn't stand watching him insult women, since gender equality was important these days. The Empress said no, because his smile looked very strange. At that moment, her uncle appeared and said that the family didn't care about her humble origins and had raised her as if she were part of the family, asking if this was how she repaid them. The Empress asked the protagonist who that man was, and Lu explained that he must be someone older from the Lin family but that he had never met him. The man kept pointing at her and shouting, saying that the Lin family was being humiliated and that she should apologize to young Master Pan. The protagonist told her to leave it to him, but the Empress interrupted and answered her uncle, saying that if they considered themselves noble people, in truth, they were nothing more than people without virtue who only cared about appearances. She then started saying a lot of things, leaving the man speechless. Next, she asked if she had said anything wrong, and added that if there was a problem, since he didn't seem to have much time left to live, he should take it with him to the grave. The uncle then fell backward, and Lu was impressed with what she had just done. The chief's uncle stood up and said that this was too much, a real outrage. The Empress replied that if there was nothing more to say, she would take her leave. The uncle, distraught, stated that he would reclaim everything the Lin family had given her and expel her. At that moment, a man appeared, asking her to wait. He turned to Lu and asked if he could get to know him, saying he wanted to know who the master of our protagonist was. Lu began to speak but was interrupted. The man continued, saying that the martial arts world was very complex and that he didn't think it was appropriate to go into details. If you know what I mean, he added, while looking at Lin's brother. Lin Wei stepped forward and said that the guests had no malicious intentions, and to be honest, having the support of martial arts groups was good for companies like theirs. Our protagonist responded that it wasn't that he didn't want to answer, but that he never had a formal master. However, he had received guidance from some notable figures. Lin Wei commented that there was no need to discuss business today, and then said that Brother Lu and Miyaoki seemed to have a special relationship, since she had only brought one person home in all these years, and of course seeing someone so talented made me feel at ease as her brother, he added. A man watching from a distance said that earlier Lin Wei had been talking about marrying off his sister, and now he was trying to make new connections. Another man nearby said that was very despicable. The Empress then asked everyone to stop the idle chatter, as the farewell had already been made. Her brother, watching the two leave, commented that it seemed Brother Lu and Miyaoki had other plans and shouldn't be disturbed. At that moment, a waitress approached Lin Wei and handed him a phone. The Empress observed her, and then pointed at the young woman, asking her to come closer, which left the girl confused, wondering what was wrong. The Empress asked her to go fetch a box of Coca-Cola. Irritated, she insisted, asking if the girl hadn't understood her. Besides asking for it to be delivered to that place, she also wanted it sent to every residence, store, and building owned by the Lin family, and to make sure it never ran out. Lin Wei asked what the girl had done. Irritated, the Empress told him to ask her, as she dared to gossip about the guests. Lin's brother figured that she must have heard what had been said earlier. Lin Wei then ordered the girl to go now, saying that if it wasn't done by tomorrow, she would be fired. Sometime later, the Empress and our protagonist were sitting at a table in a nearby diner. The Empress was drinking her beloved Coca-Cola, while the protagonist felt quite satisfied with the late-night snacks. She finished her drink and was very happy about it. Looking at the can, she said it would be even better if it were cold. The protagonist then offered her another drink and said it paired perfectly with street food. Looking at the bottle, the Empress asked what that strange thing was. The protagonist replied that it was a type of fermented alcohol with a different flavor, unlike the one she had tried before. The Empress tried a bit and said it was quite different from the drinks in her time. But then she asked why it looked like Coca-Cola. She grabbed a can and declared there was no way she would trade her Coca-Cola. The protagonist replied that maybe it was because both were carbonated. She then offered it to him again, and he thought to himself that it would be like an indirect kiss. He said he would go get a new bottle. While the Empress was alone at the table, she overheard a conversation. Some men were intimidating a young woman. They surrounded her and said that her family owed so much money that he would come visit her every day. The Empress turned toward him with a look of utter disgust. The men then got even closer to the young woman and told her to go with them. A young man who had just arrived asked if that wasn't going too far. One of the men shouted for him to go back where he came from and never show his face again, and the guy ran off. The Empress, trying to ignore the situation, continued drinking at her table. However, one of the men grabbed the girl, who said she didn't want to go. The man replied that she didn't have much of a choice now, and another one, standing behind her, pushed her forward, telling the others to take care of her. He told her to be a good girl and just have a few drinks with her older brother. Suddenly, a bottle hit one of the men. The three of them asked who had done it. The Empress appeared and said that since he wanted to drink, that was for him. The men approached and asked if she was mad about it. One of them, noticing the Empress's beauty, said it was fine. He would take her to have a drink too. Some time passed, and one of the men was crying for help, while the Empress held another by the collar, her skewer still in her mouth. She calmly resumed eating and told them not to run, since they wanted to drink so badly. She crouched down and said that after he drank that, she would seal his meridians and pressure points using true energy. At that point, all the fluids in his body would reverse, his urine would accumulate, and he might even explode. The man asked if someone could call the police. Lu returned and asked what they had done to provoke the Empress. She replied that she just wanted to teach them a lesson. The girl from earlier approached and explained that those guys had been intimidating her and wouldn't let her leave, so her older sister decided to act. At that moment, the skewer vendor asked who was going to pay for all this and shouted for the men to wake up. A little later, The police arrived on the scene, and the men pointed at the Empress, saying she was the one attacking people. The protagonist turned and realized the police had arrived. He asked the girl to repeat what she had said to the police, as it would help them. She agreed but then ran off, saying she was sorry, but if this came to light, she'd be in serious trouble. The Empress told them to forget about her. If she wanted to run, so be it. The protagonist, nervous, said it wasn't that simple, since everyone thought the Empress was guilty. As the officer approached, the Empress said she could handle it too, but Lu grabbed her by the hand and said she wasn't going to face anyone. He then ran off, pulling the Empress with him, asking if she was stupid and telling her to hurry and leave. Meanwhile, the skewer vendor cried, asking where his money was. Later, in a safer place, the protagonist felt relieved for having trained, because otherwise, he would have been out of breath by then. He then said he didn't think she was the villain in that situation. The Empress asked why he thought that. Lu replied that all he could think about was that what had happened in the past was probably the same as what was happening now. The Empress then recalled the incident, how she had been misunderstood by people while trying to help, and ended up being seen as a villain. She said it had been so long that she could barely remember the details. The protagonist then said he didn't know exactly what had happened, or what was right or just, but from now on, he would watch everything she did, and if possible, reveal the truth to everyone. At that moment, the Empress moved closer and asked if he wanted to go to her world with her, saying it would be very interesting. Embarrassed by the situation, the protagonist asked who she would be in that scenario, calling her by every name he knew. She replied that she wasn't that old-fashioned and told him to call her Chang Niang. And so, Wei and Lu discovered the name of the beautiful Empress. They then returned home. The protagonist felt relieved that his house was nearby and invited her in. He looked for his brother and realized he was no longer there. Seeing something on the couch, he figured his brother was still tossing things around the house. Feeling awkward as he picked up the questionable object, he asked her to wait a moment so he could tidy up. A few minutes later, he asked her to sit and questioned why she wanted him to call her Changnyang. She explained that, in truth, she was just a soul fragment bound to an artifact, with no connection to that body, and that her physical form had perished a long time ago. To sustain the artifact with her soul, she had been suppressed within that woman's body for hundreds of years. If the Empress hadn't gotten drunk and let her guard down, she would never have seen the light of day again. She sat on the protagonist's lap, and, embarrassed, he asked for a moment to process all the information. She leaned closer and asked for his help to set her free, saying that if he did, she would forever be in his debt. She added that she had been crafting weapons since childhood, and was willing to share all her knowledge with him. She concluded by saying that, unlike that rigid and naive woman, she was very experienced. The protagonist grew nervous upon hearing that and asked how he could help. She asked him to look at something. A mark appeared on her shoulder, and she explained that it was a seal that required true energy to break. She intended to teach him the technique to do so. Getting closer, she said that even if it didn't fully free her, it would greatly reduce many of the restrictions placed on her. The protagonist tried to collect himself and said he would give it a try. Whether she repaid him or not, he was happy just to help. He asked her to relax her body and close her eyes. He extended his hand and asked if it was there, and she confirmed. Then, he struck the seal with a blow. Watching all of this strange behavior, the protagonist wondered if it might be a case of multiple personalities, and that maybe he just had to switch them physically. Meanwhile, in front of a massive gate, the Lin family was gathered as Lin Wei knocked on the door. A young woman answered and said they must have received word that her master would not be attending today. She asked if there was anything else. Lin Wei responded that she shouldn't misunderstand. They hadn't come for no reason. Turning to the other men, he explained that Mr. Wang had just arrived in Zhejiang, and the banquet that night was prepared to welcome him. Upon hearing that he wouldn't attend, they grew concerned about his health and came to check on him personally. The young woman replied that Mr. Wang was doing very well, but the young mistress had just returned, and it wasn't the right time. She then closed the door while Lin Wei politely asked her to pass along their greetings. Frustrated, one of the men muttered that the old man was giving way too much importance to the matter. Lin Wei replied that old Wang was an important figure in the capital, and his arrival in Zhejiang would be a major deal for them. With the Wong family around, no martial arts sect would dare act within the city. They then decided to leave, and one of the men asked that Youwei be introduced to them. A few minutes later, the young woman reported to Mr. Wang, saying the businessmen had been sent away. The old man smiled and said he couldn't meet them. His precious granddaughter had returned. Xiao Tu then appeared, carrying 3 buckets, and asked if that was how he treated his precious granddaughter. Irritated, old Wang snapped, "Who told you to lose to a man? You're going to practice 3,000 more times." Crying, she tried to explain, "But Grandpa, Youwei is really amazing. You'll understand when you meet him." Returning to Lu's house, the Empress woke up and said she never thought she would have a day like that. The protagonist said it was all thanks to the alcohol. She got up and asked what the bump on her forehead was. Lu replied that he had no idea, maybe she had hit her head somewhere. He then offered a glass of milk to soothe it a bit, and said he didn't know she was so intolerant to alcohol. The Empress told him to be quiet, and said it had been a long time since she had drunk something like that. She turned the glass over and said it was true energy that helped her sober up. The protagonist, sitting at the table, said it must be very difficult to be an empress, and asked what the problem was with her other personality, Qing Niang. The Empress then spat out the milk, and asked if he really met Qing Niang. He said yes, that she said she was a spirit trapped in her body, and asked for help. Then he asked what a spiritual artifact was. The Empress asked if that was what Qing Niang said, and the protagonist asked if that wasn't a good thing. She explained that what Qing Niang said was right. A spiritual artifact refers to a spirit that nurtures an artifact and merges with it to significantly increase its power. She is indeed a spirit that the Empress imprisoned in an artifact. The protagonist, startled, asked where the spirit came from. The Empress began to tell a terrifying story and said the protagonist would regret helping her. She asked if he had forgotten that she was the Empress who held the lives of many people. The protagonist then felt relieved for having made the right choice. The Empress asked what he meant by that. He replied that he knew she wasn't after his life, but he didn't know if Qing Niang felt the same way. The Empress said it was a good decision because he had just saved his own neck. Watching the Empress, the protagonist wondered what she meant by that, and felt she was deceiving him. If Qing Niang had really suffered so much, wouldn't her resentment be even greater? The Empress put her hand on his shoulder, and he felt a pain as if he had been hit. Embarrassed, the protagonist told her not to spend so much time on her phone and go get a massage. At that moment, Lu's brother returned home, saw the door open, entered the room, and asked if he wanted something to eat. The young man looked at the Empress and said Lu was already well fed, so he was leaving. But he grabbed the protagonist and shook him, asking how he dared to do adult things in front of his dear Vivian. Annoyed, the protagonist said he had told him to keep Vivian safe, but he hadn't. The young man replied that she was his girlfriend, and asked why she couldn't sit in the living room. While they argued, the Empress was eating donuts and enjoying them. The young man then turned to the Empress and asked if she was really Chief Lin. Lu replied that she had gotten a little drunk, so he had brought her home to sober up. The young man quickly offered more food to her and said she could eat as much as she wanted. Then he started searching through a drawer, pulled out a smelly bag, and said it was butterfly candies. He explained he had waited in line 3 days to get them and asked her to try some. The protagonist tried to stop the young man at all costs, but he raised his arm and offered the bag to the Empress. As they argued again, she thought this seemed like family. A few minutes later, sitting in the living room, the young man started talking about a famous celebrity named Li Ziyan, who was holding an event tomorrow. It was very difficult to get tickets, and since she had signed a contract with the Lin Corporation, owned by Lin's brother. The protagonist asked if she was another internet celebrity, and warned him not to forget he had maxed out his credit card, trying to find out that a streamer was living with a top supporter. The young man ended up sitting there, crying while eating a bowl of instant rice. Frustrated, the young man said this time it was different, and that he truly supported the girl without expecting anything in return. He then showed a photo of the celebrity, a beautiful girl with violet hair and eyes, who made the protagonist's heart race. He stood up and told his brother not to say another word, because his dream of getting a ticket was about to come true.
A few minutes later, the Empress was sitting on the couch, writing some talismans. The protagonist's brother asked if she liked talismans, and the protagonist replied that she was pretending to be a Taoist, and told him to be quiet and keep washing the socks. She picked up one of the talismans and asked Lu to inject pure energy into it. Holding the talisman, he asked what it was. She explained that the talisman created a simple energy formation and that, since the protagonist was about to advance, it would be very useful. The protagonist then asked if there were any obstacles in the advancement and if she shouldn't be nearby. She said it was fine and that she needed to practice for a few days. The protagonist thought that he would finally have some free days and wanted to find a beautiful girl. Some time passed, and a crowd had gathered in front of a stage. Meanwhile, at the company where Lu worked, the manager was delivering the confide he had requested. The protagonist handed one of his tickets to his brother, who was overjoyed with the opportunity. The two of them then went to the big event. Lu asked why the event was taking place in the street, and the brother replied that it was to promote urban harmony, which was why Yin Yin had been invited to represent the event. Speaking of her, the young woman arrived on stage and thanked everyone for the support they had given her. The crowd went wild at her arrival. The protagonist's brother asked if he didn't think she was really cute, and he replied that her face was beautiful, but a girl couldn't rely only on beauty. The two continued talking about her, and she stared at them from the stage, having heard everything they said. Still, she continued with her speech, saying that everyone should work together to build a better city. Then she took off her sandal and said that anyone who didn't listen would be punished, saying this while stepping on the man next to her. The entire audience went wild, with everyone wanting to be punished too. But at that moment, the man lying in front of Yin looked toward her foot. The protagonist noticed something was wrong, and suddenly the man grabbed her foot and began kissing it. He said she wouldn't be able to escape, and she asked if he wasn't a hired actor. The protagonist quickly threw his brother toward the stage and said he would only help him this once. The man kept holding on to her, saying he had waited a long time for this moment. Suddenly, the protagonist's brother dashed at high speed, taking the man along with him. They stared at each other for a moment, and then Lu's brother landed a blow on the man. Other men also rushed toward the stage to help rescue Yin Yin, but she stepped down and walked toward the protagonist. She shook his hand and thanked him for acting at the right time. She said that if it weren't for him, she didn't know what could have happened, and confessed she heard everything he said earlier. The protagonist, completely captivated, believed that his charm was irresistible and that her hands were incredibly soft. But at that moment, the other men turned to the protagonist, thinking he was trying to get close to her. Desperate, he told Yin that it seemed her fans had misunderstood everything and that she should explain it to them. With a sinister aura, she asked if he knew that a handshake from her could be so strong. The protagonist asked why she was doing that to him, and she replied that with the kind of abilities he had, he'd be able to handle it. Lu ran away desperately, trying to tell everyone that Yin Yin was an evil woman, but the crowd of love-struck fans didn't hear a single word he said. After running like a madman, the protagonist finally managed to shake off Yan's fans. That was when a man showed up and said he had finally found him. Lu tried to speak calmly and said he hadn't done anything to Yin Yin, but the man, without thinking twice, tried to attack him. The protagonist, confused by the situation, asked who he was. The man began claiming the protagonist was involved in the death of Xia-san. Lost in thought, the protagonist realized that the energy emanating from this man was similar to that of those who had previously attacked him and the Empress. Still, the protagonist ran toward the man and, with incredible speed, positioned himself behind him and struck a blow that sent him flying into the wall. Lu asked the man to reveal who had sent him, but suddenly a metallic sphere came flying at the protagonist and hit him directly. Another man arrived at the scene and asked his companion, Fanger, why he had come so quickly. He added that now Fanger's visa had been wasted. Note: if visa is meant as something specific or a name, let me know to refine this. Two more men came from behind and ended up surrounding the protagonist. Lu felt intimidated. He believed he could handle one, but not three. That's when his brother arrived, shouting happily that he had found Lu and was also glad the protagonist had thrown him onto the stage. The men turned to him with angry expressions, and the boy wondered if he had arrived at a bad time. One of the men replied, "No, you arrived at the perfect time." A few minutes later, the brother was being struck by the metallic sphere. He shouted that he didn't want to die yet, especially since he hadn't had any children. Meanwhile, the protagonist was fighting one of the men. He He turned to his brother and told him to leave, and the brother agreed, saying they really needed to get out of there. But the enemies said they didn't need to worry, no one would be leaving that place. Another fight broke out, and a cloud of smoke filled the area, causing the enemies to hit each other by mistake. They stopped for a moment and wondered how that could be happening. Surrounded by thick smoke, they asked who was there and added that cheap tricks like that wouldn't work. At that moment, Liu and his brother were being pulled out of the place by a young woman. After running for a while, she said that was far enough. Removing her mask, she stated that the martial artist legion wouldn't follow them there. Lying on the ground, the protagonist's brother said a goddess had just saved him. The protagonist replied that she was taking all the credit for it. He then introduced himself and said that this time he owed a great favor to the heroine, Ziyin. She asked him to be quiet because she didn't want her name getting spread around. Enchanted, the protagonist thought he had misunderstood her. She couldn't possibly have a heart as cold as a demon's. She then approached him and asked, "Do you hear that?" "Hear what?" He replied. She answered, "The sound of a racing heart, from someone who was just saved by a woman who's not only beautiful, but also lives a discreet life, has a good heart, and won't ask for anything in return." She said she was happy to share in everything he had saved for his future wife. Smiling, she asked, "Aren't those the thoughts of a man in a moment like this?" The protagonist then thought he had been right all along. She really is a demon who plays with people's hearts. Heading to a quieter place, the protagonist asked Ziyin why she didn't fight back on stage, since she was so skilled. She replied that it was an order from the company. She had to appear vulnerable. After all, if she didn't look that way, how would she be someone people felt the need to protect? At that moment, the protagonist could only think about his brother, who was being fooled just like everyone else. Liu then asked her about the martial artists legion she had mentioned earlier. She explained that it was a group made up of martial artists who specialized in eliminating people. They were well known for their high success rate in completing missions. Even high-level individuals and celebrities couldn't escape them. She continued, saying that if the protagonist wanted more detailed information, he would have to attend her events more often, or at least message her to get cheaper tickets. But the protagonist stood up, refused the offer, and thanked her, saying he would find out on his own. Shocked, she asked him not to be like that and offered a 20% discount. A few minutes later, Liu was wandering around, thinking that with these guys chasing him, he needed to grow stronger. He pulled out his phone to ask the Empress what kind of spiritual jade was necessary for a spirit array. He called her, and she said he needed to go to a place that sold jade, and by injecting a bit of energy into it, he'd be able to tell which one was a true spiritual jade. Then she added that if he had no more questions, she would return to her tasks, and hung up. At that moment, a system message appeared, stating that the protagonist had shocked an unknown individual, and that the system had delayed delivering his reward. Reading the information, he remembered this was the reward from the fight against the martial artists. Then he wondered what the purpose of this new penetration technique was. Embarrassed, he looked at a girl and muttered that this technique must be meant for. Suddenly, he could see the inside of the girl's body, like an X-ray scan. Shocked, the protagonist asked if the system was joking. After all, what would he need this for? Unless he was planning to become an orthopedic doctor. The protagonist felt comfortable with the true energy that emanated from a jade item. The higher the quality of the item, the more true energy it returned to the one who injected it. The vendor, noticing the protagonist acting strangely, said he could examine the items all he wanted, but drooling like that was just weird. He then asked if the protagonist had some kind of unusual fetish. Liu asked how much the bracelet cost. The vendor said it was 2 million, but currently had a small discount. Shocked by the price, Liu replied that the jade was full of impurities and that he'd look elsewhere. Looking back as he walked away, the protagonist thought that instead of robbing a bank, opening a jade store would be a better plan. Meanwhile, the furious vendor shouted that he didn't want to see him there ever again. At that moment, Xiaodu appeared with her grandfather and called out to the protagonist, asking what he was doing there. Liu replied that he was just browsing jade markets. Excited, she said it was a coincidence, as she and her grandfather were there for the same reason. She then introduced the protagonist to her grandfather, saying that he was the guy she had mentioned before, and that losing to him wasn't her fault. Liu greeted Mr. Tu, but the old man corrected him, saying that his surname was Wang. He went on to say that he had heard from his granddaughter that Youwei was very talented since childhood, and asked if he would mind sparring a little with this old man. Smiling, the protagonist said he was exaggerating by calling himself old. Mr. Wang simply replied that he had spoken on impulse. Xiaodu hugged her grandfather again and said they were leaving now, and when Lu had time, she wanted him to come hang out with them for a bit. The protagonist agreed, saying he would visit when he had time. However, something about Mr. Wang seemed strange and caught the protagonist's attention. As expected, Mr. Wang moved quickly and tried to land a punch on Lu. Dodging the attack, Lu said that even though Mr. Wang was an older man, he still relied on quick and sneaky strikes. Xiaotu, desperate, asked what her grandfather was doing. The old man then said that if he didn't do something about that brat, the boy would steal all the attention and control from his beloved granddaughter. Revealing his true form, he declared, "I'll show you that I'm still her grandfather." The two prepared for a confrontation and then began a sincere and well-paced exchange of punches. Xiaodu asked her grandfather if it was really necessary to take things so seriously, and he replied that it was, because this was about a man's honor. Master Wang said that Lu had good skills, but that wouldn't be enough to steal the administration from his granddaughter. Xiaodu commented that once her grandfather got into that state, it was impossible to stop him, so she decided she would call her sister Ling to help with the situation. Master Wang activated his flame fists and launched himself at the protagonist, who blocked the blow. At that moment, Lu thought it would be tough to deal with the old man, but then he remembered his new penetration technique. Seeing Lu pull back for a moment, Master Wang asked if he couldn't handle it anymore, but Lu was actually focusing on using the technique to find a weak spot. He then activated his celestial fist technique and managed to hit Master Wang, launching him far away. Feeling confident, the protagonist realized that his plan had worked, and a system message appeared, stating that he had successfully combined the celestial fist and penetration techniques, thus acquiring the new piercing fist technique. Lu was very pleased with this achievement. He charged toward Master Wang, and both he and the old man smiled, confident they would continue exchanging blows. Using his new technique, Lu spotted a weak point in Master Wang's shoulder. He aimed for a direct hit, but the old man, suspicious, quickly dodged. He then asked the protagonist what was wrong, why his punches fell off. Without wasting time, he landed a solid uppercut to Lu's stomach, sending him crashing backward. Seeing Youwei fall to the ground, Master Wang commented that he still needed more training. Some time passed, and Lu woke up wondering what had happened. Looking to the side, he saw someone standing in front of him. It was the Empress, who remarked that she didn't know he had the habit of sleeping on the streets. Lu asked why she was there, and she replied that she'd heard there was a refining furnace nearby and asked him to take a look. She then crouched down in front of him and grabbed his clothes. Alarmed, he asked what she was doing. She responded that, fortunately, he wasn't seriously injured and added that Master Wang's cultivation was the best she had seen in the area. She stood up and said that this should serve as a lesson, not to go around picking fights without being strong enough for it. As he tried to get up, the protagonist said that he had been forced into the fight. Then he added that he now remembered. During the battle, he had used the penetration technique and saw an injury on Master Wang's shoulder. He said he stopped before hitting it directly, or else things would have gotten much worse. Looking at the Empress, he wondered if she was really worried about him. He reached out to grab her hand and said it was nothing serious, and that they should talk more as they walked. She asked him not to touch her since he was all dirty. Meanwhile, elsewhere nearby, Master Wang wondered where his little bunny had gone. He smiled, accepting that the boy she introduced to him was indeed strong. Remembering the last punch from the protagonist, he admitted it was quite dangerous, but laughed and claimed that even so, his skills were still superior. However, he felt a sharp pain in his left shoulder. At that moment, he heard Xiaodu's voice telling her sister Ling that they had found him. Looking at the two of them, he thought it would be best to just pretend to be unconscious. That's it for today's episode. Make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a chapter. See you in the next one.